So I want to introduce Matt Johnson, representing Supervisor Janice Hahn, who has been an unbelievable hero. There's amazing videos of her on dealing with this issue on the blog. I encourage you to watch them.
Thank you, Steve. Good morning, everybody. Today we mark the 5th anniversary of the massive February 2015 explosion at the Torrance refinery. The explosion injured 4 refinery workers, caused millions of dollars of damage, and terrified the local community. But it could have been much worse. The explosion launched an 80,000-pound piece of debris that came within feet of hitting a tank of modified hydrofluoric acid, a substance so toxic that even a small release would have been deadly. Supervisor Hahn knows that we can never make this industry 100% risk-free, but we can take a common sense approach to reduce the risk and protect our workers and our residents. For the last 4 years, the supervisor has been working to phase out MHF use at refineries in a responsible way that preserves vital jobs. In fact, the last 2 refineries in California that use this dangerous chemical are located in the supervisor's 4th district. As an AQMD governing board member, she fought for a rule to phase out MHF to better protect both the refinery workers and the community. Unfortunately, a majority of the governing board accepted a proffer written by the refineries themselves, which allows them to continue to use this dangerous chemical and offers no accountability to ensure that they implement additional safety requirements. This is not over. 5 years after the 2015 explosion, we know that as long as our refineries continue to use MHF, the people who live, work, and play near these refineries are not safe. Supervisor Hahn will continue to stand alongside groups like the Torrance Refinery Action Alliance and the Coalition for Clean Air, and urges our state and federal regulators to do what is right and to phase out the use of this dangerous chemical. Thank you.
Supervisor Hahn. I wanted to also recognize from Maxine Waters' office, if you might just say hello. And
good morning. I don't have much of a voice due to this cold that's going around. My name is Hamilton Cloud. I'm Director of Special Projects for Congresswoman Waters. She had a scheduling conflict this morning, but asked me to come and join you today. One, to express her support of the effort to ban MHF, and also to take a lot of notes and to listen very carefully and to give her a full report next year. So thank you.
And, Maxine Waters, Congress member, was under intense pressure. She wrote a letter calling for a ban. There was another round of letters needed. She was under intense pressure not to do that, and she stood up and did it. So she is a brave example and the 2 other Congress people who have been actively involved, 3 others, Nanette Berrigan, Congressman Lowenthal, who has just written a letter of support, and Ted Lieu, who is, as I mentioned, going to do some stuff with EPA, along with probably other Congress members. And the fact that they're not here is partly due to our inability and minimal resources to get and really engage with all the people that should be, so we can use help in that area. So now we're going to see a video that kind of sums up the whole question.
Recall these important facts from the AQMD board hearing in February 2019.
A 2-inch hole could release over 1,000 gallons in just a couple minutes. Here, it's called the Goldfish Test, and this was done in 1986. A single point of release was only 1.65 inches wide, a very small hole about the size of a golf ball. And just with that, 1,000 gallons were released in about 2 minutes. That's where the figures I mentioned before. It was traveling at the time about 18 feet per second. There was a wind, but you can see it's ground hugging. It's rapidly expanded. There's unique properties of this acid in terms of its boiling point that even though it's released initially as a liquid, it quickly turns into a cloud. This is actually a picture of the refinery after that explosion in 2015, and natural disasters can't be predicted, but could cause some issues that might lead to a release, as well as intentional acts have been discussed as well. If it's a natural disaster, there's already a great tax on the emergency response teams dealing with, say, an earthquake. The hospital rooms are full.
Even with the best of intentions, mitigation systems do fail. During the HF release at the Marathon Refinery in Texas, falling equipment broke off 2 pipes on the HF tank, while also damaging the emergency water spray system. During the 2009 Citgo refinery release of 42,000 pounds of HF, the water suppression system ran out of water, fighting both the fire and acid. Mitigation measures failed in the Union Carbide, Bhopal disaster, and the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Accidents happen. Maintenance has historically been low priority in the refining industry.
His team counts about 500 accidents in the last 20 years, but that's likely an underestimate.
By and large, the philosophy in the refining industry is push it until it breaks. But are the rules strong enough? Absolutely not.
Why? Why isn't it being done?
Why isn't the oil industry doesn't want it?
They have been able to significantly influence the progress on safeguarding the public.
Consider these health and safety hazards during a hydrofluoric acid release.
It is uniquely hazardous to health. It is not just an acid that burns, but it does, once it gets on your skin, it does penetrate into your body and actually attacks your bone structure. There's just some pictures here. It does require immediate treatment, and it does require specialized treatment.
My name is Dorothy Homer, and I'm a physician with 10 years of ER experience. And I urge you to keep in mind the University of Texas Emergency Preparedness presentation that was held in September. Remember, they practice for the worst reasonable scenario. He mentioned 500 patients would overwhelm his hospital, and there's a limitation on the number of burn and ICU beds, not to mention the national shortage of calcium gluconate. Locally, there's only enough for 40 patients, they calculated at that time. Even if you survive, there's permanent scarring. I told you about the difficulty determining actual exposure versus asthmatic or the worried well with such insidious initial symptoms of cough and sore throat. When time is of the essence for treatment, this is a triage nightmare.
According to the Los Angeles County Health Department, field tests and experience from other major chemical incidents suggest that evacuation zones in response to an MHF release could extend up to 10 miles from the refinery. This equates to potentially millions of people at risk.
My name is Katie Butler. I'm representing the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. I'm a board-certified toxicologist with over 10 years of experience in health risk assessment and risk management. We support the fundamental principles of the proposed approach that enhanced mitigation and phase-out of modified hydrofluoric acid is called for. We encourage the district to take a path forward that requires modified hydrofluoric acid to be phased out as soon as possible.
In 1991, the AQMD said itself in Rule 1410, while engineering measures can be undertaken to reduce the probability of an accidental release, they cannot eliminate the possibility of a major accident. Elimination is the only 100% fail-safe measure to protect the community.
Okay, and now we're going to hear from some of those 2 stars that you saw in that video, live, in person.
Hello, thank you for being here. I'm Dr. Moore from that video. I'm a local physician, and a lot of information was already in those videos that you've just seen, so I'm only going to comment on a few things. First, a slight disclaimer, that photo of that horrid looking arm was most likely from a splash exposure from liquid. Number two, I mentioned about the national shortage of the antidote, calcium gluconate. It is no longer on the national shortage list, but quite frankly, it doesn't matter. If your hospital doesn't stockpile it, how are you going to get it? I also want to say that I think Dr. Eng, Dr. Hayati, and Dr. Eninger are local hero whistleblowers. They call out the refinery's misinformation, and I've seen it myself. When the chairman of the AQMD refinery board is chuckling with the vice president from Valero about how calcium gluconate is available everywhere online and it's in tons, you really lose trust in what the refineries claim. The refinery and the fire department are well versed in splash exposures. That happens. It's just immediate water and that topical calcium gluconate they mentioned in a gel. That will not happen. That will not help you at all for this cloud type scenario. You need breathing treatments and IV treatments. Now, Dr. Mastrangelo in Texas, they practice. They do decontamination drills, evacuation, coordinated local EMS and fire department, and medical education for triage and treatment. To my knowledge, we here don't. If there were such a disastrous, the impact on the community from such a large exposure would be disastrous on multiple levels. The communication systems, they don't drill, we don't stockpile the antidote. There wouldn't be enough hospital beds for the large public community that would be exposed. The whole question boils down to, can it happen or can't it? Will it or won't it? And the next speaker can make some comments in that regard. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak here today. I want to thank our team at County Public Health. We have a couple of our team members here today in the back, Christine DeRosa and Elena Hopner. Will you please stand? They're in the back with information on how to report odors, environmental problems, if you have health questions, how to contact the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health. And this is all part of a more or less recent effort over the last few years of our department to increase awareness in communities across Los Angeles County that face environmental threats like this one. Since my time working at the department, it's just been a few years now, we continue to face an increasing number of environmental threats. In 2015, the Aliso Canyon natural gas blowout displaced 8,000 people from their homes. We responded to another well blowout in Marina del Rey last year that skyrocketed for about 10 minutes into the air, a mixture of oil and gas. And that kind of exposure, as many of you are aware, can increase risk of exacerbated asthma symptoms, respiratory illness, and other health effects. More recently, the jet fuel jettison from Delta flight that had to take an emergency landing resulted in jet fuel being rained down on a number of communities. Students, teachers, residents, they were exposed to that jet fuel. It caused skin irritation, respiratory problems, and so this all shows us that the unthinkable does happen. And we cannot ignore the fact in our work over the last few years that we've seen many of these environmental threats resulting from an old and failing oil and gas infrastructure. The department has expressed a number of concerns about the use of modified hydrofluoric acid, or MHF, at local refineries. in a landscape, as I've explained, where refinery fires, explosions, natural disasters, other environmental threats are not uncommon. Health and safety hazards posed by the use of MHF at the Valero and Torrance refineries are simply unacceptable. Current regulations and mitigation systems are insufficient to protect the public's health. As we've seen from these videos and explained by Dr. Fine from AQMD, a small breach, even the size of a golf ball, could result in an amount and concentration of MHF that could lead to an environmental and health catastrophe. Public Health has recommended, and we will continue to recommend, to phase out MHF. In the interim, we expect these two refineries to be taking every and all safety measures to reduce the threat of MHF while being phased out. When our communities face a known hazard, and when we know there is precedent throughout California and the nation to eliminate such a hazard, we have a responsibility to do so. Ignoring potential disastrous outcomes or hoping that they will not occur is not a sufficient reason to continue the use of MHF, which places our communities and our workers in harm's way. The use of MHF in local refineries poses an ongoing and unacceptable risk to the public's health, and now is the time to eliminate it.
And so we'll have some questions and answers, as I said, at the end. We have one more main speaker, but I also wanted to recognize and thank David Poster for providing refreshments to us all. And he's a role model, okay, in the sense that we all need to kick in to the can at the end, at the door, because you know, this is how we've sustained ourselves. This is how we printed 100,000 door hangers on the South Bay homes. This is how we've made banners. We've driven people to, sent people to Sacramento. We've driven people from Wilmington over to Diamond Bar, etc. Also, one of our funders, small funder, well, big for us, but is Liberty Hill Foundation. They've given us 2 grants of $2,500 each over the last few years, and we're going to go back to them for some more. I personally think we should be hiring a staff person to do a lot of this work. That means, you know, we need to get $15,000, $20,000 together to pay somebody half-time for a year, or, you know, full-time for half. These are ideas, and we're going to have some brainstorming sessions in a few minutes.